Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Don McMahan with Flycloud Consulting. I will be your host today of all the hosts. I have some distinguished guest speakers with me. Matt Schlegel of Schlegel Cascade.
Thanks, Don, so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. So my name is Matt Schlegel. My company's Schlegel Cascade, and I will be talking about cost reduction in the pandemic world. And so let's get into it. We're going to talk about what's going on in the expense management world in the pandemic world. So what gets measured gets improved. The cost categories that I and my team like to focus on are categories that are particularly challenging to really dig in and figure out where the excess margins are built into the cost structure. And then we use our particular expertise in each of the areas to dig that out. My background is in engineering. I was an engineer and engineering manager for over 20 years. So measuring things is just built into my DNA. So getting into the cost reduction business was very comfortable for me, but very exciting as well, because there's just so many opportunities to use analytics to understand where the excess cost is, and then go and get that out for our clients. So the three categories of cost reduction I'll be reviewing today are cell phone cost, small parcel fees, and merchant processing fees. In each of these categories, we tend to find that our clients, when we go in, are overpaying by about 25%. So, that's the opportunity for savings that we see. And the reason why people are overpaying is because it's so difficult to understand where that hidden cost is buried. And so having insider expertise like we have and we bring to the party for our clients, we're able to go in and figure that out and help them reduce those costs. So, and in each of these categories, we're seeing an impact by the pandemic, and I'll be overviewing that as well with you. So let's start off with cell phones. I noticed that quite a few people on the poll had an interest in cell phones. So we work with companies that have usually between 50 and 1,000 cell phones. So that's kind of our sweet spot. So this is an example of a company that had about 125 cell phones on their account. They were paying around $84,000 annually for the cell phones. And after our analysis, we were able to bring that cost down to around $61,000 annually, so $27,000 in savings. So this is a pretty typical, $22,000 in savings, 27%. So this is a pretty typical example of what we can find in savings. And this is without changing providers at all. It's literally no impact on the users. People continue to use their devices as is. It's just the CFO and the controller see the cost go down. The main areas that we're finding for cost reduction are understanding how the phones are grouped on the plan, and then ensuring that they are in the most cost-effective groups. When we go in, we're finding that they're not necessarily set up on the most cost-optimized groups, so that's a big chunk of the savings. Another chunk of savings we get is finding discount codes that can be applied to each of the lines. And every line qualifies for some discount code. It's just a matter of getting the best discount code. And by going through each of the lines carefully on the plan, identifying what the best discount code is, we can generally find another big chunk of savings. I'd say between 1 and 2, that's 80% of the savings that we find. And then we'll also go through and find that miscellaneous services will get attached to a line. They may have, inadvertently, hit a text, and then all of a sudden $199 charge is appearing on their cell phone account. So one of these, so by carefully going through and figuring out if there's excess charges, we can go and eliminate those if they're not for a specific business use. And then finally, unused lines. You might be surprised, but when accounts get bigger, it gets a little more difficult to figure out whether a line is being used or not. And the bills, for a 125 line account, the bill might be, 200, 300 pages that you need to sort through to figure out whether the line is being used or not. So we go through and we have the tools to do that and figure out, if a line isn't being used, and then bring that to the attention of our clients. So in the pandemic world, I'd say number 1 and number 4 are the ones to really pay attention to right now. The usage patterns may have changed in your company. Stay at home, folks that are in a stay at home situation may be using their device more, or they may be using it less. And so you want to understand how that usage pattern has changed, because that will affect what plans you want to put that line on. Also, if a line is being used for data and the employee isn't in a place with access to Wi-Fi, then you might start to see extraordinary amounts of data usage. So you need to have a look at that and figure out what's the best way to minimize data charges by either getting Wi-Fi for that employee or putting them on a plan that is more cost effective for large amounts of data. And then on the unused line side, in regrettable situations where companies have had to lay off employees, even if temporarily, you'll want to go in and see if you can suspend those lines while they're not being used. Even if you do plan on bringing the employee back, you can suspend them in the meantime, sometimes for up to 6 months. And for instance, in the case of Verizon, if you suspend the line charge goes down to 0. So you might as well be saving that money while the line isn't used. So those are 2 things to look out for on the cell phone side. Then on the shipping costs, we'll just go through this briefly. Again, we're seeing varied responses among our clients. Some clients, especially in the e-com space, have extraordinary increases in shipping, while some clients, for instance, in the apparel space, are seeing a dramatic drop-off. So it really depends on the business, what's going on there. The thing that we do when we go in and analyze the shipping costs is we look at something called the operating ratio. That's essentially the margin that's built into the cost structure. Again, having folks on our team that are former FedEx and UPS analysts, we know exactly where that margin is in the proposals and quotations that our clients are receiving. So we can identify where those excess costs are and squeeze them out. And the good news is that we know the shipping companies will live with 5 to 7% operating margins. So that's the goal, is to get it from whatever the starting point is down to the 5 to 7% range. And that's when we know we accomplished our mission, and we're seeing anywhere from 13 to 30% savings, often 25% savings for our clients. And just here's a quick example of a company that ships bedding products and sleep products. They had annual shipping costs of $6 million, and we were able to bring that down to $4.2 million for 1.8 million in savings, annualized savings. It's 30%. And again, typical for us is 25% savings. All right, let's get over to merchant processing. A lot going on in this world right now. I have a picture of a merchant processing statement up on the screen. The interesting thing about the merchant processing world is that, as opposed to the shipping and cell phones where you get a bill, in the merchant processing world, you get a statement. And that statement has a bunch of information in it, but since it's not a bill, it often doesn't get scrutinized. And yet, if you do scrutinize it and you have the expertise to go through all of these codes, you can find out where that hidden margin is and start to squeeze it out. So here's an example of a client that had annual fees of just about $100,000 a year. And we were able to bring that down to 57. So this was a more dramatic case where we had around 43.7% savings for this client. And this was a client that was using QuickBooks. They wanted to stay on QuickBooks. QuickBooks tend to have higher processing fees. So we were able to accommodate them with a technology solution that allowed them to continue to use QuickBooks, but have access to lower cost processors that were more aligned with providing processing services to their particular business. And that's why we were able to get the dramatic savings here. The big areas for cost reduction that we're finding are the interchange rate optimization. We go in and look at any commissions that are built into the cost structure and minimize those. We're looking at fees that may be applied to the account, and we're looking to minimize or eliminate them. And then finally, we look at downgrades. So that's when a card is there's the best rate that the card can transact at, but if for some reason there's inadequate information entered into the transaction, it gets bumped up to a different tier. That's called the downgrade, and then the rate goes up for the merchant when the money comes out of their bill. So we in the pandemic world, the things that you want to pay attention to are in the rate optimization world is if the nature of your business is changing and you're getting more or less business, and that business is coming from a different demographic, then that can change the way your rates on your account. So, for instance, we had an example where they were doing mostly business-to-business transactions using commercial cards. It switched over. Once the pandemic hit, the business dropped off, but a business to consumer business picked up, and now they were transacting more on consumer cards. They have different rate structures, and so that changed the nature of the processing. So that's an area where you want to go in and look and make sure that if you're processing in a new way or a new set of customers with a new set of cards, to make sure that those cards, the rates on those are also optimized. And then, and the same thing on the downgrades. If you're used to transacting in a certain way with a certain set of customers, but now you're switching over to a new set of customers, and they're transacting in a new way, then if you're not set up correctly for that new set of customers, you could be incurring excessive downgrades. So if you're seeing transitions in your customer base, then I would say those are two of the things that you really want to pay particular attention to. And then, you know, the final thing that you'll want to be careful of is that as we go into a recession, the processors tend to become a little more cautious. And so you just want to be aware that as we go into the recession, you may get inquiries from your processors, and what they're going to want to know is, you know, when are you being paid for the service that you're delivering? Like, you know, if you're in a restaurant, you know, you eat a meal, the service is delivered, then you pay for it, right? That tends to be a low risk transaction, as opposed to if you buy an airline ticket that you're planning on, you know, going on a trip 3 months from now. If you, for some reason, are unable to use that ticket, then the bank may be on the hook for making sure that you get refunded. And so because the banks and the processors are essentially giving you a unsecured line of credit for the 6 months in which they've made that promise to you, you know, they're getting more cautious because of that. So that's just something that you need to be aware of in the current situation. And so those are the highlights of what's going on in the cost reduction world for our group. Thank you so much for listening, and I will hand it back over to you, Don.